Unlit Matches, Chapter 3.
Don't say goodbye. We'll see each other again. We already met this time. So it's gotta happen again, right? Come on, don't cry. Or you'll make me cry too.
Tears fell from both of their cheeks as they tightly hugged for the last time in a while. Abraham was moving. There was nothing either of them could do but let life take its course, as two 13-year-olds had no say in what adults did, especially not regarding their parents. Even in their youth, they both felt something akin to grief for losing their best friend. They knew each other's secrets, locked away for varying reasons, but still alike in hiding. One named but set aside, one nameless but terrified. Both knew it didn't look good for the future without the other. But what could anyone do? Defeated and grief-stricken, the pair let go and walked down different paths, wondering what things will be in store. Who can really say? Who decides these things? They both decide to focus on making it through tomorrow as a start. Abraham startles awake from the memory, twisted up from a dream-like state. He smells something. No. Someone.
Shit,
he says, barely audible, trying to scamper to his feet.
I thought this place was supposed to be abandoned. Who in their right mind would walk freely into a place like this?
He thought to himself frantically. As he practically sprints to the dilapidated bathroom and attempts to hide, the smell gets stronger. It's familiar to him. Oh God, what if one of those scientists from the lab found him? Abraham desperately tries to think of an escape plan, or really any plan at all. As if his fear grows, he feels his body react defensively. His teeth turn razor-sharp and animal-like. His eyes turn to barely visible slits. Something appendage or limb-like starts to emerge from his back. The man, if you can call him that, currently hears footsteps growing louder, a scent growing stronger, and is fighting every urge he has that tells him to break. The abomination that keeps trying to crawl from a portal within his very own skin breaks through, splashing blood onto the once white tiles. It also, unfortunately, forces Abraham to let out a small cry. As much as he tried to keep quiet, leaving the sound of approaching footfalls in its wake. Even if it was someone from that torturous laboratory, he didn't want to hurt someone. Not again. He couldn't let it happen. He'd never forgive himself. Whatever was going to happen was going to happen, as a humanoid shadow crept right before the room's precipice. Still trying to hide for as long as he can, Abraham holds his breath as he stands back against the wall, his only vision of the outer room being the broken mirror diagonal to him. Hello? Someone there? The unknown figure calls out. Abraham can see it's a man, maybe around a similar age to him. But he really couldn't tell anymore, honestly. He barely lets out a sigh, even though he's relieved to know it's not someone he's met before, especially not from past times where he's nothing more than a rat in a cage. The man has dark hair from what he can see and a slender build. He seems alert but scared, which is a fairly normal thing to feel in situations like these. Abraham can smell the man's fear, his own form still monstrous and starving, as the unknown individual makes his way cautiously through the bathroom's doorway. Knife in hand, he meets eyes with a being that is feral and terrified, like a rabid dog. He of course screams at the indescribable horror in front of him, but with being only mere inches away, stabs the monster with his knife reflexively. Out of pure instinct, Abraham's body reflexes a mass from his back that can only be described as eldritch, grabs the man by his throat and pins him to the wall, the knockback of which causes debris and dust to fall, as well as the mirror which ungracefully shatters into minuscule shards on the floor. The two stare at each other, wide-eyed and full of adrenaline. Though dark, with Abraham's night vision, he sees the man in full before him. Thin and short black hair, brown eyes, and that birthmark. No, it couldn't be. Things like that don't happen. A million thoughts raced through his mind, stopping short as soon as the man smoked through choked lungs. Bram? Words spoken from a voice that was foreign, but all too familiar to him. A name, his name. Whatever defensive measures his body took to keep himself safe fell, as he felt himself reverting back into whatever normalcy he could take. The man, no, his friend, was released from the thing's grasp, gasping for air and doubled over. The knife that was lodged deep within Bram's abdomen clatters flimsily to the ground as the wound closed itself in a matter of seconds. They both tentatively approach each other, both struck with the same feeling of disbelief. Is that... It's you, right? Please, tell me it's you. Abraham started to openly weep, closing the gap between the two of them, praying for a miracle to any god that would listen. Abraham, What happened? Oh, God, it's really you. His best friend started to cry as well, as they went to hold each other in the intent of never letting go, no matter what horrors and pain they just experience. Did you finally find a name? Abraham replied, shaking and grasping onto what felt like a mix between a nightmare and a dream all at once. Liam. My name is Liam. Liam. Profound silence ensued where neither of the men spoke, tightly holding one another as if one were to let go, the other would disappear in an instant. There was something poetic about the bizarre scene, with the blood-soaked tiles and shattered glass illuminating moonlight filtered through a boarded window. It fell wordlessly onto the two figures. So close it was that their souls were intertwined. It lasted for what felt like decades, though it could have just been a moment, where they stayed like that, crying and holding on to each other like lifeboats adrift in an indefinite amount of stormy sea. Without words, they kept each other standing, clutching onto this moment for as long as possible. Before breaking apart, they both share the same thought. I don't ever want to let go again. Unlit Matches, Chapter 4. Abraham doesn't dream anymore. Well, not in the regular way, at least. Visions of memories that twist up inside his mind, his own swirling together with past of others and thoughts that were never his. On this night, he recalls a memory that's assuredly his, no matter how unlike himself he felt in that moment. Adrenaline surged through his entire being as he escaped that pristine concrete building, running wildly at a speed that he knew was inhuman, feeling like his legs could shatter underneath him at any moment. Flashes of pain shoot through his arms, oddly bent and contorted, that would make even a skilled doctor shudder at the angles of them. His heart, whatever took its place now, pounded in his chest and throbbed in his head as frantic breaths escaped his mouth. What will I do now? He thinks, sprinting towards a cluster of dense trees, hoping, praying that maybe he can escape. If it comes in the form of death, he doesn't mind anymore. He collapses, gasping for air as if all oxygen has disappeared from Earth entirely. He's fallen on a particularly gnarled root in the ground, but the pain has been too great for too long. He barely notices. He shuts his eyes. They aren't his anymore, anyway. Maybe if he goes back to sleep, he'll wake up from this nightmare, though he can't fool himself even with an inch of his life to cling to. His breathing falls ragged, the death rattle, they call it. He's heard it before, and memories of his dying mother spring to the front of his thoughts. He doesn't believe in an afterlife anymore, but he hopes that somehow, once he dies, he'll see her again. He thinks of her funeral, and his best friend who held his hand as he wept until the sun dipped under the horizon. Even as a rational kid, that day he felt as though he'd never stop crying. The tears poured out of him like a hurricane. The time he slowed to look at her casket, he half expected to be covered in his own blood. There was no way his small frame held that many tears to shed. Now, with his eyes that won't peel themselves fully open, he finds it ironic that he's covered in his own blood. Maybe some others, too. He fully shakes with pain now, fading in and out of consciousness, trying to cling to a happy memory to go out on. He remembers the day they buried his mother, a lukewarm hand holding his in stunned silence as distant relatives and his mother's friends apologized to him as if they had any say in her passing. He felt numb. His vision started to blur as his friends spoke to him in words that he couldn't decipher. He looked palely at them. Eyes widened as concern grew immensely in their face. Suddenly he's being pulled away from the crowd and into the brush of dew-covered flowers and grass, being guided by the trail of a black dress flowing in the humid wind. He doesn't remember what they said, if either of them said anything at all. They might have just sat there in silence, equally knowing that there were no words to be spoken. It's as if the two of them had reached telepathic understanding, that they could be happily mute for the rest of their lives if chosen. Of course something had to break the silence, as they said their goodbyes on that day. The words weren't memorable to begin with. He remembers their face, their eyes locking with his own, full of not pity, but understanding, and years of hurt that had worn on the very fabric of their soul. Irises full of empathy and compassion and genuine pain for the fact that someone else will have to endure an ache like this that will never go away. It's like both of their heartbeats synced up to the same march, as they both silently vow to do everything they can to not let others feel something like this again. They both know it's an impossible task, akin to Sisyphus and his boulder, endlessly grasping the other in an attempt to save each other from drowning in an ocean that will rise eternally. More pain snaps him out of this memory. His ears ring with non-existent bells and whispers from languages humans were never supposed to acknowledge. As his sight starts to black in and out, a strobe light of dark leaves and stars above him. He sees them.
It's you,
he says through almost cut vocal cords, rasping through whatever life he has left inside of him. The figure moves closer, and it's his friend in that same black dress from that day, staring down at his figure with red eyes. He's too desperate to care, trying with every fiber in his being to reach his arm towards them, barely moving his shattered fingers in an inch, no matter how much he struggles.
It is not I that you seek,
the figure says, their voice echoing in the branches and bark of every tree in the surrounding forest, shaking the ground as if every blade of grass was waiting with bated breath.
I have laid judgment upon thee. I shall aid you. Your mind is of many realities, but your spirit remains stubbornly human. I have aided humanity in the past with varied outcomes. It has been eons since then, leaving you as my first exception in ages. I tend to conclude accurately, though if I am at air, I will demolish thee painlessly. Your debt now lies within the woodlands hither, although I and the conifers ask for favors most would deem meaningless. Do not let our aid be taken lightly, human.
Abraham could barely feel the sensation of being moved within that forest, only lingering on a single word as his eyes started to close. Human.